made contact with Seth in December of 1963. From her second-floor apartment, Jane spent countless hours in trance speaking for Seth as her husband, Robert Butts, patiently transcribed every word. The Seth phenomenon has resulted in numerous books, thousands of pages of unpublished material, and the development of a philosophy that has changed the lives of many of us. I'm Richard Kendall. I was a member of Jane's class for a number of years, an experience one doesn't forget. The tape you are about to see was recorded on June 4th, 1974. It begins with an interview of Jane and Rob conducted by Harold Channa and filmed by Stephen Bell. Following the interview are excerpts from Jane's class filmed later that evening, containing the only visual record we have of Seth speaking through Jane. I was at that class, and little did I imagine that over 12 years later, I'd be introducing this tape.
Hello again. The previous tape portion of me speaking was recorded in April 1986. It is now 2 years later, April 1988. The responses to the questions I will be asking have been excerpted from that June 1974 interview, originally conducted by Harold Channa and filmed by Stephen Bell. Following that, you will see the only visual record of Seth speaking through Jane Roberts. Let me introduce the individuals crucial to the Seth phenomena. First, there was, of course, Seth. Seth said he was an entity or personality who no longer needed a physical body, who had experienced many different physical lives on Earth. While speaking through Jane, he dictated numerous books on the subject of life, death, dreams, and reality. Jane Roberts, who died in 1984, was the medium through whom Seth spoke or came through. Today, she'd be called a channeler. Jane was an author, poet, and the wife of Robert Butts. Robert Butts was, and today still is, an artist who resides in Elmira, New York. Besides encouraging Jane, he took the dictation as Seth spoke, playing a critical part in bringing the books to fruition. Until Seth entered their lives, Jane and Rob were a typical, although artistically inclined couple. How does an entity such as Seth enter into one's life? In Jane's case, it began with an unusual experience of automatic writing.
This all began late in 1963. One evening, Jane was writing poetry after supper, as is her usual custom, and she went into an altered state of consciousness. This was entirely unexpected by her, and she had an out-of-body experience. She found her consciousness leaving her body, and at the same time she began to write in sort of an automatic script.
You know, I've been a poet from the time I was a child, and I just was writing, and the next thing I knew, my consciousness was just gone. And it wasn't in out-of-body in the respect that I had another body, or thought I did. My consciousness went through, like, the window, and then into the leaves, and into everything. And it wasn't until I came back that I found this script and realized that, you know, I had to have written it. That the stuff that was in the script was stuff I had felt while I was out, to some extent, in that the script, again, the title was The Physical Universe as Idea Construction. The idea being that everything is a result of idea and has consciousness. But when I was out, I would go in atoms and molecules, and I felt their consciousness. But then when I read the script, it was terribly hard to accept portions of it because it pretty much went against what I've been taught.
What was doubly unusual about this experience was that up until this point in their lives, both Jane and Rob knew close to nothing about psychic experiences or the related subject matter.
Wow! I mean, I had done no reading in this field. I had done nothing. So as far as I knew, this had never happened before to another individual.
It was something
any place. It was, you know, where did I go? How did I get out of my body? This is fantastic.
This peculiar experience alone did not bring Seth into their lives. As in all matters, people make choices, and these choices then bring on new experiences. Jane and Rob could have chosen to ignore this experience, to believe that Jane was losing her mind, or they could have chosen to explore the matter further. This is what they finally chose to do.
I was a writer,
Okay.
and so I had just finished my first science fiction novel, which was a paperback, called The Rebellers, and I was looking for something else to write. And Robbie came up with the idea, joking. He said, why don't you do a book? This must have something to do with ESP or something.
Right.
So why don't you get some books, read up on it, try some experiments, and if they don't work, you can always say that, well, I tried all this stuff, and it just doesn't work. And if it works, well, you know, who knows? So we started out, we got 2 or 3 paperbacks. We found out about Ouija boards and everything. And we borrowed a Ouija board. We didn't even buy one. And after, I forget, once or twice or something, we started to get stuck on the board. And with the psychological knowledge I had then, the first thing I thought of was, well, it's a subconscious. Rob was pushing it, or Rob would say I was pushing it. So we went through that long kind of thing. And after only maybe 5 or 6, 7 sessions with that, Seth came through vocally. I would start to know what was going to be said, and then I would start to want to speak. Well, on the board, the pointer would go over the alphabet and spell messages. And after a while, the messages said they came from a personality called Seth. And I didn't particularly believe in survival of personality to begin with. I also figured that if personalities survived, they had a lot better things to do than come through on Ouija boards. I thought it was from a level of my subconscious or something. The material that we got, however, was excellent. And I was enough of a critical writer myself to know the material was good. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have continued. It didn't make sense in a philosophical way, and and it showed no extravagance in terms of going overboard religiously. It was sound psychologically as far as we could tell. I still think we were very lucky in that we had not read an awful lot of the current occult literature. Because if I had worked bored and had read a lot and perhaps believed what a lot of people believe, that this had to be either a good spirit or a bad spirit, or that this was dangerous, I really don't know what I would have done. The idea of possession never crossed my mind because I never accepted it to start with. I mean, it just didn't exist for me.
Well, Jane didn't even believe in reincarnation.
What was their next move? Again, each step of their involvement with the Seth phenomenon is clearly marked by the conscious choices they made.
When the whole thing began, it didn't take us long at all to realize that it was a creative endeavor. And that underlay everything else we did. And that's the main reason we decided to continue. I think that, as Jane said earlier, it had been too much of anything, too sentimental or too religious or too even pragmatic. We'd have turned away from it. As it was, it suited us, of course. And so we chose to, after it began, I went out and got a few books, and I wrote to a few people, some of them authors of these books. And the replies we got didn't satisfy us at all. And we quickly learned that we had a chance here in a creative way to make a contribution, and at the same time learn on our own as we went along. So all of these factors intrigued us no end, because they were based on the strengths of our personalities, especially Jane's ability with words. And so we knew that it was obvious that her writing ability was a valuable asset here. And my working with images as an artist, that came in handy in all kinds of ways also.
We felt as if, again, because we knew so little, that we were explorers, and we were going to be very careful about exploring something we didn't understand, but we were going to do it.
I'll ask people to go along with it, but we think that we even chose to be born at this time, so that in this particular way, this information could start to be given out.
Seth himself had not yet directly entered into their lives. As far as psychic matters were concerned, Jane and Rob had dabbled with a Ouija board, conducted historical research, yet were developing a genuine excitement and curiosity. Please note that as Jane is speaking next, the camera will focus on one of Rob's paintings on the wall behind her. Rob uses images from his dream state when he paints portraits. This particular picture is how Rob envisioned Seth.
Well, after the board session stopped, as they did very quickly, I just began speaking the words automatically for Seth without knowing what I was saying until I came out of trance. There was no training per se for this, no self-hypnosis, nothing. It just happened. Although I did give consent. That is, had I not wanted to do it, it wouldn't have happened.
Okay,
but I was so curious. I wanted to know what was happening. In the beginning, I paced the floor constantly in trance. I refused to sit down because I had read about Casey, and he lay down on a couch, and I thought, no, not for me. I'm not going to, and I figured that if I didn't like what was going on, I could run, which was silly because I was the one that was doing it. And then it took, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 years before I sat down, before I then would close my eyes. And then there was a period where I closed my eyes and never opened them. And then where all of a sudden, I opened them, but I was in a deeper, of course, kind of trance than I had been before that transition. The one point on reincarnation I wanted to mention, though, too, and Seth.
A lot covered there. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, was that one of my first short stories was on reincarnation. And I thought as an idea or a concept, it was great. I loved to play around with it. But when this starts happening, when, say, magic becomes real, and all of a sudden you're told, well, you had this kind of life, or you did this, or this is a fact, then I bombed. Because it was one thing for me to play around with the concept and think, well, I go for it, or I don't, or what. And another to accept it as a definite fact of existence. And also, I don't like, and never have, and Seth doesn't either, the idea of karma, as it's been spoken about so much, the idea of guilt, where people believe, for example, that they're suffering in this life because of a karma that they have in a past life. I don't believe in that kind of a connection. And also I believe that all time happens at once. So reincarnations have to exist at the same time as this life, and there has to be a constant give and take.
All at once now.
Right. I like the idea, say, simultaneous life.
What does a couple do after experiences such as these? Remember, this was 1963. There was no New Age movement. The youth counterculture or hippie movement of the late 1960s hadn't yet occurred. Shirley MacLaine was simply an actress, as was Jane Fonda. There were no health videos, nor variety of talk shows featuring channeling. Health consciousness meant eating hot dogs and playing softball. Mediums and fortune tellers were found in carnivals next to the fat lady and the strong man. So what did Jane and Rob do?
We told no one for a long time.
You did?
We told no one. I mean,
Well, even if we'd wanted to run out and tell somebody, we didn't know who to tell.
All right.
this stuff wasn't accepted in those days to begin with, but until I actually started speaking for Seth, I had never heard of anyone speaking for anyone. I had heard of, Ruth Kernan. But I had never heard of anyone speaking for anyone. So again, when that happened, for all I knew, I was the only one alive. But I wasn't about to go and tell the neighbors particularly either. Not at the time.
Jane and Rob stuck to it and continued their experiments and experiences with Seth, letting only a few close friends in on what was happening. From these private sessions, group classes soon started, and Seth's books were not only published, but sold in the millions. Jane and Rob never let Seth's popularity go to their heads. They never sought publicity, they shunned media interviews, and were very careful to avoid becoming dogmatic leaders of any particular group or creed. They never realized how popular Seth would become.
But I've learned over the years that other people are really interested, and each person's interest is just as legitimate as the next. And so we've learned a lot from that. We didn't anticipate any such response from others at all.
Do you think that
in the beginning?
People are very interested in this, and there are certainly spiritualistic groups, where they have a so-called spirit guide. Now, I don't call Seth a spirit guide either. I find myself in a peculiar position in that I don't particularly accept, I do want to watch my words, the dogma of any particular group, organization. This was my experience. I wasn't about to have it interpreted for me by others. I never thought of Seth as some white-cloaked spirit who was just floating around. Part of my life's work certainly is to try to understand the nature of our personalities, our personalities, what abilities we've got, what happens so that we can get this kind of information. And one of the things that I really hope is that people would begin to trust their own revelatory experience and not automatically cloak it in whatever dogma they believe in.
Right, that's beautiful.
That's how the Seth phenomenon came about. But what was it actually like to be a medium for Seth? How did others relate to the Seth personality?
Yeah. Other people relate to him because they see the phenomena and they see Seth come through, whatever terms you want to use. Where I am not able to relate in that same way.
But you have your feelings, your interior experiences are unique.
Right.
And no one else can approach those. See, in the beginning, Jane was always asking me, what did he say, how did he say it?
Yes.
Was he nice to these people that were here?
Yeah.
And so forth and so on. And I would do my best to explain, but this is all from an observer's standpoint. It doesn't mean as much as her own subjective experience.
In a private
So,
session,
Do you think, go ahead, sir.
he is to the point. When he comes through, he says good evening or something, then he says dictation, and he just goes ahead and dictates a book. I would say to Robbie, are your fingers tired, do you want a break, or whatever. In class, he very rarely goes into that kind of a long monologue, which for us might last over an hour. Instead, he'll relate to people, or he'll come through because of a comment someone asks.
That concludes our interview with Jane Roberts and her husband Robert Butts, originally conducted on June 4, 1974. Following, you will see something unique and exclusive, the only existing video of Seth speaking through Jane Roberts. This took place later in the evening during a Seth class in Jane's living room. In John Climo's book, Channeling, published by Jeremy Tarcher in 1987, Jane Roberts is credited as being the first medium of modern times, the one who pioneered the current New Age channeling phenomenon. Climo writes, "The modern era of channeling began with Jane Roberts and her source, Seth. The publication and widespread distribution of millions of copies of the assorted Seth books beginning in the early 1970s brought channeling to broader public attention than had anything or anyone in this century except for Edgar Cayce. And now, for the first time in any major metropolitan area in the world, we will broadcast Seth actually speaking through Jane."
I'll bid you good evening. And understand your responses to our friend here. For when he speaks, you fear the vocabulary. Because you fear the beliefs that you still are afraid operate. You are afraid that after all, for all of your hard-earned knowledge, the others are right. You are not sure of your position, and therefore you must defend it with a great vehemence. You sense in our well-meaning and beautiful friend those beliefs against which you yourself have fought for so long. And you are afraid
that in your heart of hearts you do not trust the joyful integrity of your own being. You are afraid that after all the old stories may be correct and there is something wrong in your creaturehood. That you are after all put down because you are human, and that you are after all damned because you are what you are, and that no matter what you say or do, you are originally in one way or another damned. You are afraid because our friend Andy is so sincere and so intent that after all, what he unconsciously feels and what sometimes comes through in his talk is right after all. You must ascend meaning that there is something wrong with where you are and what you are. Now, in those terms, what you want to be is within you now and within your glowing creaturehood. As he tried to say, there is no above or below. You are blessed because of your being, not damned because of it. As I have told you often, there is a spiritual biology within your being, and it speaks through each of your moments and through your sexual experiences. It speaks when you drink a glass of water, or when you wiggle your foot. That is also a highly biological nature to your spirituality. Your atoms and your molecules and your cells know themselves to be part of all that is. They do not question. That does not mean that there is anything wrong with questioning. It does mean that I say to you that you are blessed because you are. That your spirituality is known through the glories of your flesh, and that your flesh becomes more spiritual because of its existence through the seasons and its experience with the time that you know and recognize. You form your own reality. I say this to you each week. Yet through your own dream experiences and through the suggestions that I will give you, that I hope that you will follow, you will be able to discover this for yourselves. What I hope to be able to show you the different levels of consciousness in which you dwell. Again, as I have said before, You are indeed given the gift of the gods. You form your reality. What better gift could be given to you? How then could you imagine that you began this present excursion into this current life already damned, flawed, or forsaken? If each of you would simply listen in the quiet of your own mind to the music of your own selves, you would know that the atoms within you speak with a joyful exultation. Those atoms and molecules, luckily, have not read many of the books that you have read, and they do not read your newspapers. They know that they are blessed because they are. They know if some of you are more serious people will forgive me, and I close my eyes so as not to embarrass you. They know that existence is fun. They realize that fun is good and joyful, and that the gods play. They recognize that through expressing their own reality, they form these atoms and molecules and cells, the reality that you think of as a physical body. The atoms within your toe do not stop and say, oh, I must be responsible and sober and form this toe, and I must think very carefully before I move, because after all, I am damned to begin with. You would have some toe. Your being is important. The fact that you are, my friend, impresses the universe, and that impression is never lost. That impression lives in your terms, though time itself is forgotten and dies. Your being, as it is important. And whatever you do, it is not trivial. When you realize that your being is important, then you will realize that by being yourself, you will do in your terms important things you cannot do otherwise. Now we are here a small group, and you meet with yourself and with me, many of you, weekly, in an intimate relationship. There are those who will listen to me speak, and And I believe that you are there, audience, though I cannot see you. You are quite invisible to me. You can see the people in this room, and so you believe in their existence, but they cannot see you. And yet they believe in your existence. We then ask you to realize that though we cannot see you, we agree that you exist. I am sure that you do not need our agreement. Nevertheless, we all ask you to realize that when you look in the mirror, you see images of yourself, but you do not perceive the inner self that you know exists. And so each of us here asks each of you to realize that you have an inner identity that you cannot physically perceive, and an inner voice that you do not hear with your ears. Each of us here therefore asks you to admit the validity of your own being, to enjoy the being that you see and feel and touch, and yet to realize that you have still greater vitality and reality. We ask you, in the most scandalous manner possible, to realize one thing, that you are good, that you are blessed, and that there is nothing wrong with you. Now there are many levels of consciousness and awareness, and there are ways that things are said and unsaid. There are gestalts or families of consciousness. Each of you belong to such families. You are yourselves, yet as you have physical families, you have families of consciousness. So most of the people in this room belong to a family called Samadhi. You give the message to yourself, for you are the message. The medium is not the message. You are the message. If only we can show you yourselves enough, then you will trust yourselves enough to explore those dimensions of your own greater reality that no one else can ever know or ever explore. There are journeys of consciousness that no one can take but you. And yet as you take them, you take steps in other terms for others. And you leave marks for your brothers and sisters to follow in their own explorations. Cards that say I have been here. The place is safe. I leave you a sign of peace. Your being alone is important and has a validity beyond any philosophy. That is the message that you are trying to give to yourself. You are each trying to rediscover for yourselves in your terms now, after centuries of myths and distortions, the validity of your own beings. I ask you not to trust the validity of my being, which is none of your concern, but to trust the validity of your being, which is very much of your concern. Now, class members here know what I am doing. I ask you then to sense the energy in this voice and know that it is your own joyful vitality. I ask you to feel it and enjoy it as your own. And those who may view this class, I request that you also feel the energy of your being and know that this voice is but a dim echo of that vitality and validity that is your own. And therefore we leave this esoteric class and return you to the selves that you think that you know. You may find yourself with a random thought that does not seem to fit in with what you are doing or thinking at the time, and so you dismiss it. It seems random because it does not appear to fit in with your organized picture of reality, but it is an important mosaic that you throw away. So I also joyfully and playfully and creatively challenge each of you, even jerky boy over here, to become more and more aware of your waking experience and of those stray thoughts that come in your terms like thieves in the night. They are not official. You do not accept them. The intellect says, oh, no. Listen to those thoughts. Open your mind a mite further. In your ordinary waking life, in the middle of your ordinary pursuits, and see what miracles are there. And I say miracles. Miracles because they can help transform your own understanding and your own reality. And you have been blind to them because you fear you will lose your identity. Your identity instead, you see, can grow and include such experiences. Now I told you that class was quickening So the time is ripe for each of you. So this week particularly, beside the suggestions that I gave, be gentle with your own experience. Do not be such a disciplinarian that when stray thoughts or intuitions come to you, you dismiss them. The fields of your own beings are filled with flowers that you do not recognize. You do not stop to look at them or smell their odors. They are not official flowers or official food. Sometimes you try to be too practical. You have lovely eyes. Those eyes do not try to be practical. They see out of the joy of their being. They do not hustle themselves. The right eye does not say, is what I am seeing right? And the left eye does not say, is what I am seeing wrong? They see together, and in being themselves, they see for you. For the atoms within your eyes do not see this image, though you do. You interpret the image, and you see what you see. The eye's vision, the reality of the atoms and molecules that exist within the eye, that vision is far different. And yet there is no disagreement. So there is no disagreement between your official reality and those unofficial realities that sometimes sneak through. Come out. Camera? Light?
Yeah, it's all on.
Class has been over now for quite some time, but the events that transpired during those years will never really have an ending. And as Seth might have said, in other terms, have yet to begin.
Well, let's see. Usually it's fairly spontaneous. That is, I don't do anything to induce the trance.
Yeah.
It did. My facial features change to one extent or another. They're different than my regular ones. Obviously, my own features are being used. My voice becomes quite a bit deeper. It gets an accent that's rather difficult to describe. Everybody calls it a different kind of an accent. Seth simply says it's cosmopolitan. My eyes are usually open. I can't see very well, for example, without glasses. I wear glasses. Seth immediately takes my glasses off. People that attend sessions say that he looks at them in a very penetrating but nice manner.
Yeah.
Obviously has excellent vision. He speaks in an animated manner. The voice is more masculine than feminine. So I don't think listening you mistake it for a male's voice. It's very deep, but after all, I still have to use my vocal cords. At times the voice can become quite loud, and at other times in our regular session it has a more conversational tone. Various things. Sometimes I'm having an out-of-body experience of my own and experience someplace else that sometimes I'm able to check out. Sometimes I just sort of bask in a feeling of great energy. And I have different kinds of experiences.
A lot of people are not familiar with what happens in astral travel or out-of-body experience. When you mean you're out experiencing other things, could you amplify that, Jane?
Well, on several occasions, while Seth was speaking, I would feel my own consciousness, me as far as I'm concerned, leave my body and travel to another location. Up until that time, I had more or less believed that human beings, animals, and so forth were alive. Say rocks were dead. That consciousness was something that belonged to the kind of species that I could understand. And when I was out of body, I really did feel the consciousness of rocks, trees, even the nail that happened to be in our windowsill.
Everything had a consciousness to it.
It had a consciousness, atoms, molecules. According to Seth, there's no particular number of lives that you live. That is, you don't have to live 5 or 10 or 100 or whatever. Each entity would make its own choices according to the entity's own purposes. All lives exist at one time. It's the same idea of Einstein's that time is relative to the perceiver. While we perceive time as a series of moments, one after another, and centrally that's how we react. But in a basic reality, they all exist at one time. I'll try an analogy. It's as if you have a man who is a husband, a father, a member of a civic organization, a teacher, a member of a sports organization, and perhaps another group of organizations all at one time. Now, he has no trouble keeping track of all those separate activities. But while he is being a father and is home with his wife and kids, he might completely forget for a while the teaching self or his students. He just isn't concentrating on them. If he wants to remember, he can. So in the same way, we would be living all these different roles at one time. Now the teacher, the man who is the teacher and the father and the member of these different organizations, again, can keep track of himself. And something that he does as a father will also affect something that he does as a teacher. Therefore, karma, the idea of karma has been misunderstood to mean something like cause and effect. That is, many people believe that, for example, in this life, they might have a certain problem because in a past life they did something that was wrong. Instead, all lives would be lived at once, and there would be an open-ended relationship between them. So that, though I admit this sounds far out, as you lived now, you would also be affecting a reality that in our terms would have happened back in the 14th century. I don't use the term karma, and Seth doesn't as a rule either, but the idea would be if that kind of a situation happened, that the individual would have chosen different kinds of relationships. That is, say, in one life you might choose to be the healthiest, strongest, most athletic person in the world. And in another life you might choose to be really in miserable physical shape. Not to teach yourself anything more in conventional terms, but to have the experience of what it's like to feel the universe from different kinds of focuses, and to learn not that it's noble to suffer, but that as you experience life from different focuses, there's different kinds of experiences that become highly important. The lives would be interrelated rather than one causing the other. And Seth doesn't speak, for example, in terms of crime and punishment, so that you wouldn't have one kind of a life to punish yourself for another kind of a life, but to understand a particular kind of experience.
Go slowly with me here. You believe, or Seth at least has said, that time happens all at once. We're all doing whatever it is we do in other lives all at once. As we are between lives, what has Seth described life after and before a new birth?
Oh, this is tricky. He would say that we are, in our terms, alive and not alive at the same time.
You're not helping me.
Okay. Since all lives exist at once, then the duration between lives wouldn't exist in those terms at all anyway.
We're alive and dead at the same time.
Right.
What's going on at that time?
Right. You mean when you die, what's going to happen?
Yeah, I suppose that's a nice way of putting it.
I don't know if it's nice, but I know what you mean. The situation will vary according to the individual. But, for example, your beliefs will dominate. You will continue to exist. But if you believe, say, in a conventional Christian heaven, that's what you'll experience for a while. You might get bored after a while, in which case it'll change. But that there will be people that you've known in this life or in other lives there to help you. Now, those people can be living or dead in our terms. Okay?
All right, I think.
Okay, say today I die, and I didn't really have any great relationships with my parents in this life, but I have a great relationship with a parent in the 18th century. That person might be alive today, for all I know. But if so, they would greet me in their dream state, so I would be dead in my terms. The dream state is like an in-between open dimension in which all different kinds of realities can merge.
If I die and I believe in hell and brimstone and fire, that's what I'm going to die into for a period of time.
Yeah, but it wouldn't be, forever. Some kind soul would be there to tell you, look, you don't have to experience this.
But it is interesting that we're actually programming ourselves for what we expect after death.
Yeah, that we create our own reality, not only now, but later. The idea would be that we do create our own reality, but we are not victims. No one is a victim. Therefore, that those people who have been murdered or slayed or whatever, for their own reasons, had a psychological need for that kind of experience.
So they were not innocent victims as such.
Right.
They were destined to get what they got because they really wanted it.
They were not destined to die.
They chose to.
Yeah, okay, right.
Boy, that's really something.
It's very tricky because I don't want it to be interpreted to say something like, well, it's okay to murder somebody because the guy you murder wants to be killed.
You're not saying that at all.
Uh-uh.
But you're saying in those past instances, those people chose.
Right. There's no other way to look at it, I guess, the way I look at it. Either we are victims in an unfeeling, unsensing, dumb, chaotic universe, and everything is the result of chance or accident, or we are masters of our fate. There's no in-between, and I choose the other way. I don't think that any person, no matter how gifted they are, can feel your reality in the same way or know exactly what you are thinking at any point They might know what you're thinking now, or now, or now, but that they can't know what you're thinking all the time.
Are such things as psychics real then?
Yeah, psychics are real enough. I think that any person who calls himself a guru and says that I know what you are, I know what you should do, I lay these rules down for you, to some extent is deluding himself and you also. Because I think that the miracle of being is too great. And I think that each of us has to find our own way. I'm afraid, with all my experience, I'm not sure the answer. I think we are here to be the selves that we are, and in the mystery of that being, the answer will unfold itself. And that's really the only answer that I can give.
So there's no simple, straightforward assignment.
I don't think that we can say, okay, the answer is we're here to help others, or we're here to learn, or whatever. I think those are all easy answers that we've been given. I think the answers are deeper and more complicated than that. But I do think that the hints to the answers lie in our potentials and in what we are, and in trying to understand what we are and be more of ourselves and bring ourselves into some kind of fulfillment. And then in that being, the answers will make themselves known.